The Color Purple wasn't just a period drama, it was a cultural earthquake, a film that tackled race, gender, abuse, and survival at a time when Hollywood preferred safe stories. What audiences didn't see was the brutal chaos behind the camera, furious protests from black artists, on-set battles over tone, and actors breaking down under the weight of emotionally devastating scenes. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 20 weird facts about The Color Purple, hidden struggles, dangerous risks, and shocking twists you never knew. And the bonus fact? It reveals how one legendary performer nearly walked away from the film forever. Let's dive in. 1. Steven Spielberg. Almost turned it down. It wasn't the obvious choice. Spielberg was known for Jaws and E.T., not for intimate dramas about systemic racism. He hesitated, worried he couldn't capture the black experience authentically. Warner Brothers pressured him. They wanted his name to secure box office success. Spielberg finally agreed, but only after insisting he'd lean heavily on Alice Walker's novel and trust the cast's voices. Still, critics later accused him of softening the story, particularly around Celie's sexuality. Spielberg admitted years later, "I wasn't brave enough. I just didn't have the maturity." His unease haunted him, but the gamble worked commercially. The film earned 11 Oscar nominations. What audiences didn't know was that it could have been directed by a black filmmaker. Several were considered before the studio insisted on Spielberg, igniting controversy before cameras even rolled. 2. Oprah won the role. Through sheer obsession. Oprah Winfrey wasn't a movie star. She was a local talk show host in Chicago when she read Alice Walker's novel. The book consumed her. She carried it everywhere, highlighting passages, reading them aloud to friends. When the film adaptation was announced, Oprah begged for an audition, but casting directors ignored her. She tracked down Spielberg's office, leaving repeated messages. Finally, she auditioned and blew everyone away with raw, unpolished vulnerability. Spielberg reportedly told her, "You are Sophia." Oprah poured her entire being into the role, drawing from personal trauma. Ironically, after filming wrapped, she feared the part would destroy her budding TV career. Instead, it launched her as a global icon. Without her relentless obsession, the film might never have found its Sophia, a character whose defiance still echoes decades later. 3. Whoopi Goldberg was discovered by Alice Walker. Whoopi Goldberg was an unknown comic when The Color Purple came calling. She had a one-woman show in San Francisco where she performed raw monologues about race, gender, and survival. Alice Walker herself attended one performance and was floored. Walker immediately told Spielberg, "I've found Celie." Goldberg auditioned, delivering a monologue so intense that Spielberg reportedly teared up. The role transformed her career overnight. But the shoot took its toll. Goldberg described the process as emotionally crushing, saying she had to empty herself daily to embody Celie's years of silence and abuse. The choice wasn't obvious. Other names, including Alfre Woodard and Phylicia Rashad, were considered. But Goldberg's mix of fragility and strength won out. Not a conventional beauty, not a safe Hollywood starlet, but a woman whose authenticity pierced through every frame. 4. Quincy Jones fought to produce it. The project might not have happened without Quincy Jones. The legendary music producer read The Color Purple in 1982 and immediately saw cinematic potential. He championed the adaptation when Hollywood executives dismissed it as too risky and too black for mainstream audiences. Jones personally convinced Spielberg to direct, using his industry clout to protect the film from being shelved. But Jones faced backlash too. Critics accused him of selling out by letting a white director lead the project. Jones pushed back, saying his priority was getting the story told at all costs. He also composed the score, blending African rhythms with sweeping orchestration. Without him, the film might never have left the page. His fight ensured Alice Walker's story reached millions, even if it meant enduring accusations of compromise along the way. 5. The set was emotionally draining. Filming wasn't glamorous. Many actors later described the set as emotionally suffocating. Scenes of abuse, rape, and domestic violence were rehearsed over and over until cast members broke down. Oprah admitted she carried Sophia's rage home at night, while Goldberg often stayed silent between takes to preserve Celie's vulnerability. Danny Glover, who played the abusive Mister, said he felt alienated on set, struggling with the weight of embodying such a hated figure. Spielberg tried to lighten the mood by blasting music between takes, but the heaviness lingered. What audiences didn't know was how deeply the actors suffered for authenticity. These weren't just performances, they were emotional excavations. The cost was high, but it gave the film its unflinching realism. That pain, embedded in every frame, is why The Color Purple still hits like a gut punch today. 6. Danny Glover was hated for years afterward. Playing Mister was no easy task. Danny Glover delivered one of the most chilling performances of his career, embodying cruelty, control, and generational trauma. But the role followed him off-screen. After the film's release, fans spat at him in the street, yelled insults, and even threatened him for hurting Celie. Glover later admitted, "I had to explain to people that I wasn't Mister, but they didn't want to hear it." The hostility was so intense that it shadowed his next projects. He said he carried guilt, too, questioning whether audiences could separate him from the character. What viewers didn't know was that Glover softened some of Mister's lines, believing the uncut version of the script was too cruel. Even with that restraint, his performance seared itself into the culture, proof of how deeply the film blurred art and life. 7. Alice Walker cried. Watching the first cut. When Alice Walker, the author of The Color Purple, attended the first screening, she wept openly. But it wasn't only joy. She later said the film felt both beautiful and incomplete. Spielberg had captured the emotion, but she felt key aspects, especially Celie's romantic relationship with Shug, were downplayed. Walker pressed him to keep more of the intimacy, but he resisted, fearing 1980s audiences weren't ready. Critics later echoed Walker's concerns, accusing the film of erasing lesbian identity. Still, she praised Goldberg's performance as transcendent, and she gave her blessing for the film to move forward. What audiences didn't know is that Walker briefly considered pulling her support entirely. In the end, her compromise, accepting Spielberg's vision while holding space for her novel's truth, allowed the movie to survive, though the creative tension lingers in debates to this day. 8. The film sparked boycotts and protests. The Color Purple wasn't universally celebrated. Before it even premiered, some black male leaders denounced the film, claiming it demonized black men by showing them as abusers and oppressors. Groups like the NAACP held heated debates, with some calling for boycotts. At one screening in New York, protesters picketed outside, holding signs that read, "This film lies about our men." Spielberg faced accusations of racial insensitivity for directing a black story as a white man, while others argued the film empowered women's voices. The controversy nearly overshadowed the film's release. Yet the protests also amplified interest. Curious audiences flocked to see what the uproar was about, making it a box office success. The backlash didn't kill the film. It fueled its cultural footprint, ensuring The Color Purple became one of the most debated movies of the decade. 9. The cast supported each other in secret rituals. To survive the emotional heaviness, the cast developed their own coping mechanisms. Oprah has revealed that she, Whoopi Goldberg, and Margaret Avery often gathered in dressing rooms to pray, meditate, or simply cry together. They created a circle of trust, calling it their healing ritual. Danny Glover, though seen as the villain on screen, sometimes joined, apologizing for the brutality he had to portray in scenes. These quiet moments of solidarity weren't written about in the press, but sustained the cast through grueling emotional demands. Spielberg, though not part of these circles, respected them and gave the actors space. What audiences didn't know is that the bond forged in those rituals lasted decades. The cast still speaks of each other as family, proof that even in the darkest stories, light can emerge behind the scenes. 10. Whoopi Goldberg improvised Saley's shaving scene. One of the most unforgettable moments is Saley cutting Mr. Sun's hair, singing softly as she shaves him. The tenderness contrasts sharply with the violence that surrounds her. But that scene wasn't fully scripted. Goldberg improvised parts of it, humming and speaking lines not written on the page. Spielberg let the camera roll, recognizing the authenticity. Later, editors fought to keep every second, calling it the breath of the film. The improvisation worked so well that test audiences assumed it was straight from the novel. Goldberg later explained that she drew on memories of watching her grandmother braid hair. The result is a scene layered with love, care, and survival. A rare, delicate reprieve in a story full of pain. And before we continue, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts uncover shocking studio battles, dangerous risks, and a bonus twist that will leave you speechless. 11. Margaret Avery lived as Shug off camera. Margaret Avery didn't just play Shug Avery, she became her. To prepare, Avery lived in character even when cameras weren't rolling. She wore Shug's gowns around the house, spoke in Shug's sultry cadence, and immersed herself in blues music. But it wasn't glamorous. Avery admitted that embodying a woman who both empowered and destroyed herself was emotionally draining. She often wept after filming her love scenes with Goldberg, terrified they'd be cut or ridiculed. Her dedication paid off. Critics praised her performance as magnetic and fearless. Still, Avery felt overlooked when the Academy Awards passed her by. She later said, "Shug was my gift and my heartbreak." What audiences didn't know was how much Avery sacrificed emotionally to make Shug more than a stereotype. She gave her depth, and in doing so, gave the film one of its most unforgettable souls. 12. Oprah gained and lost weight. For Sophia, Oprah transformed her body for the role of Sophia. Spielberg wanted her to appear physically imposing, a woman who could believably stand toe-to-toe with Mr. Oprah gained weight quickly, eating around the clock to build the fuller frame Sophia carried with pride. After filming, she crashed into depression when the weight didn't come off easily. She later confessed on The Oprah Winfrey Show that Sophia's body lingered with her, becoming one of the catalysts for her lifelong struggle with weight. Yet that transformation gave Sophia her unforgettable presence. Strong, immovable, and larger than life. What audiences didn't know was the toll it took on Oprah personally. The role launched her stardom, but it also left her wrestling with identity and body image long after the cameras stopped rolling. Not just a role, an imprint that never fully left her. 13. Spielberg changed key scenes to protect actors. Some of the film's darkest moments were toned down during production. Spielberg originally planned to show more graphic depictions of Mr.'s abuse, but he worried about re-traumatizing his actors. Whoopi Goldberg, especially, was new to film and already carrying enormous emotional weight. So Spielberg altered camera angles, letting suggestion replace brutality. Danny Glover later revealed he was relieved, saying, "We didn't need to show everything." The cruelty was already there in the silences. Some critics later accused Spielberg of softening the story, but others argue that restraint made the film more devastating. What audiences didn't know was that these changes weren't about censorship alone. They were about protecting the cast from spiraling into trauma. Spielberg's instincts balanced authenticity with humanity, proving sometimes less is more when the subject matter is this heavy. 14. The film received 11 Oscar nominations, but won none. It was one of the biggest Oscar snubs in history. The Color Purple scored 11 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actress, and multiple supporting actress nods. Yet when the night ended, it walked away empty-handed. The industry backlash was brutal, Many argued that Hollywood wasn't ready to reward a film about black women told through a white director's lens. Others said the Academy was punishing Spielberg for stepping outside his blockbuster lane. Whatever the reason, the snub remains infamous. Oprah remembers sitting in the audience, stunned as category after category slipped away. The public outrage gave the film even more cultural weight. What audiences didn't know was how deeply it hurt the cast, many of whom felt Hollywood dismissed their groundbreaking work. To this day, fans call it one of the Academy's most shameful oversights. 15. Spielberg shot. Much of it chronologically. Most films are shot out of order to save money, but Spielberg took a different approach with The Color Purple. He filmed many sequences chronologically, especially Celie's journey from silence to empowerment. This allowed Whoopi Goldberg to evolve naturally on screen. She began the shoot withdrawn, often whispering her lines, and by the time they filmed Celie's dinner table confrontation, Goldberg had truly stepped into her power. The choice wasn't easy. It stretched the schedule and drove up costs. But Spielberg believed the payoff was worth it. Watching the raw transformation unfold in real time gave the performance an authenticity impossible to fake. What audiences didn't know was that this decision risked budget chaos. Yet it worked. Celie's growth feels lived in because in many ways it really was. 16. Spielberg almost cut the sister reunion scene. The emotional climax, Celie running across the field to embrace her sister Nettie, is one of the most unforgettable images in the film. But in early edits, Spielberg considered cutting it shorter. He worried it felt too sentimental after such a harrowing story. Cast members begged him to keep it. Oprah later said, "That reunion was the payoff for all our pain." Spielberg relented, restoring the full scene. During filming, actors cried real tears. No one needed to fake the joy. The crew reportedly applauded after each take. What audiences didn't know was that without the cast's insistence, the film might have ended on a colder, more restrained note. Instead, it closed with catharsis, a hard-earned moment of triumph that balanced the darkness with radiant hope. 17. The film faced censorship. Battles abroad. While The Color Purple was controversial in the U.S., it was outright censored in some countries. South Africa, still under apartheid in 1985, banned the film for its portrayal of black resilience and defiance. In parts of the Middle East, censors cut scenes of Shug and Celie's intimacy, calling them immoral. Even in Europe, television broadcasts often removed sequences of domestic violence. Spielberg later reflected, "I expected controversy, but not erasure." Ironically, the bans only fueled underground demand. Pirated VHS tapes circulated globally, spreading the story even where governments tried to silence it. What audiences didn't know was that The Color Purple became a quiet act of rebellion abroad. Viewers risking punishment just to see Celie's story unfold. The film wasn't just cinema. In some corners of the world, it was contraband. 18. The cast struggled with on-set divisions. Not everyone bonded. Behind the scenes, tension simmered between some cast members. Veteran actors sometimes resented Oprah's inexperience, while newcomers felt intimidated by the seasoned professionals. Danny Glover admitted he often isolated himself, partly to stay in character as the despised Mister. Spielberg tried to foster unity by hosting group dinners, but cliques formed anyway. Still, when cameras rolled, the fractures translated into powerful realism. Celie's isolation felt sharper, Sophia's defiance rang louder, and Mister's menace became even more believable. What audiences didn't know was that the chemistry on screen wasn't entirely scripted. Some of it came from real divisions simmering beneath the surface. In the end, those fractures weren't weaknesses. They became another raw texture woven into the emotional fabric of the film. 19. The novel's ending was nearly changed. Alice Walker's novel ends with Celie finding peace in her home, surrounded by family. The screenplay initially considered altering this ending to focus more on romance between Celie and Shug. Studio executives pushed for it, arguing audiences needed a love story payoff. Spielberg resisted. He insisted the true arc was Celie finding her voice, not her partner. Whoopi Goldberg sided with him, saying Celie didn't need to be rescued by love. She rescued herself. In the end, they kept Walker's spirit intact, closing on Celie's empowerment rather than romance. What audiences didn't know is how close the film came to diluting its message. Had the studio won, The Color Purple might have ended as a simple love story. Instead, it remained a radical declaration of selfhood. 20. The legacy split critics for decades. When The Color Purple premiered, reviews were polarized. Some critics hailed it as a masterpiece. Others slammed Spielberg for sentimentalizing black suffering. Roger Ebert defended it passionately, calling it the year's best film. Meanwhile, the New York Times criticized it as misguided. The division didn't fade. For decades, scholars debated whether the film was a triumph or a betrayal. But audiences embraced it. Lines from the film entered popular culture, and generations discovered Celie's resilience. What audiences didn't know was how personal the story became for those who watched it. Letters poured in to Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah, thanking them for representing silenced voices. The split remains, but the film's endurance proves its power. Love it or critique it, The Color Purple refuses to fade into history. Bonus fact: Oprah nearly lost the role forever. Here's the shocker: Oprah almost got fired. During early test screenings, some executives felt her performance as Sophia was too raw, too loud. They pushed Spielberg to recast or cut down her role. Spielberg resisted, but warned Oprah the studio was circling. Distraught, Oprah checked herself into a weight loss camp, convinced she had ruined her chance. Weeks later, Spielberg called her personally. "They can't take Sophia from you." The role stayed, and Oprah went on to earn an Oscar nomination for her very first film. What audiences didn't know was how razor-thin her Hollywood future hung in that moment. Without Spielberg's protection, Oprah might never have become the icon she is today. The Color Purple wasn't just a film, it was a battlefield of art, race, and resilience. It launched Oprah and Whoopi into superstardom, scarred Danny Glover with hatred he didn't deserve, and sparked debates that still rage nearly 40 years later. If you found these hidden truths eye-opening, hit like, subscribe, and share your favorite fact in the comments. And remember, sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that change the world.